There was a time when Elias Wolf commanded respect, not through fear, not through violence, but through an unshakable presence. He was the kind of man whose silence was louder than any insult, whose mere glance could make enemies stutter. But all men, even the unbreakable ones, have their moment of downfall. For Elias, it came at the hands of the one person he never saw coming, his own brother, Adrian. The betrayal was not immediate. It was a slow burn, a well-orchestrated coup wrapped in smiles and false loyalty. Adrian had always been the shadow beside him, watching, waiting, and when the time was right, he struck with precision. Elias lost everything overnight. The empire he built, the power he wielded, the allies who once swore loyalty. All of it was stripped away. But worse than the loss of power was the humiliation. They didn't just take his throne. They made him watch as Adrian sat in his place, as his enemies raised glasses in celebration, as his name became a whispered joke in the corridors he once owned. Adrian didn't kill him. That would have been mercy. Instead, he exiled him to the very streets he once ruled, leaving him to rot among those he had once looked down upon. But Elias was not a man who begged. He was not a man who pleaded for second chances. They expected him to disappear, to fade into obscurity, to drown in the humiliation. But what they forgot was this: Elias Wolf was not the type to stay down. If the world thought they had seen his downfall, they had no idea what was coming next. The resurrection of Elias Wolf. Elias Wolf was not dead. They wanted him forgotten, erased from history, like a whisper lost in the wind. But he was still breathing, still watching, still thinking. And if there was one thing he had learned in his years of power, it was this: the best revenge was not loud. It was silent. It was patient. It was inevitable. The first night after his exile was the worst. The city that once belonged to him now spat him out like rotting flesh. He walked the alleys where his name had once commanded fear, only to be met with sneers and empty eyes. The people he had once ruled over barely glanced his way. A few recognized him, former associates, lower-ranked men who had once groveled at his feet. They laughed. They mocked. Wolf? No, it can't be. The great Elias Wolf? Roaming the streets like a beggar? I thought Adrian had the decency to put a bullet in your skull. Guess he wanted you to suffer instead. Look at him. No empire, no power. Just another broken man. Elias said nothing. He didn't need words. Mockery was a cheap form of victory. It was the tool of those who had no patience, no true understanding of control. Let them laugh. Let them think he was finished. Because when he returned, it would not be with words. It would be with action. But first, he needed power. The art of disappearing. Elias vanished from the streets. For weeks, no one saw him. The world thought he had finally accepted his fate, that he had curled up in some gutter, waiting to die. But that was the first mistake they made. Elias was never a man who waited. In the underbelly of the city, where forgotten men became ghosts, Elias rebuilt himself. He changed everything. The man who had once worn tailored suits, who had walked with the arrogance of a king, now dressed like the nameless, the faceless. He became a shadow, watching from places no one would suspect. And in those shadows, he found something more powerful than fear. He found knowledge, from the lowest criminals to the highest elites. Information was the one thing that could destroy even the mightiest of men. Elias listened. He learned. He studied every move Adrian made, every person who had turned against him. Adrian was powerful now, yes, but he was sloppy. He indulged in the very things Elias had always avoided. Public praise, excessive spending, the illusion of untouchability. The same people who had betrayed Elias. They were already whispering behind Adrian's back. Loyalty built on betrayal was fragile. Elias knew how to break it. A ghost begins to haunt. The first move had to be psychological. Elias didn't want Adrian to see him coming. Not yet. He wanted Adrian to feel him first, to doubt his own mind, to wonder if Elias Wolf was truly gone, or if he was lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. It started small. A note left in Adrian's private office, in handwriting only Elias could replicate. The throne is not yours. You are only borrowing it. Then, financial accounts, silent leaks that couldn't be traced, bleeding Adrian's wealth drop by drop. Small numbers at first, just enough to make him uneasy, to make him question if he had missed something. Next, whispers spread through the city, murmurs that Elias Wolf had been seen, that he was back, false sightings, manipulated rumors, a ghost story designed to unravel Adrian's mind. And Adrian? He responded exactly as Elias expected. Paranoia crept in. Security doubled. Trust wavered. Adrian started seeing shadows where there were none. He began questioning the loyalty of his men, interrogating allies, searching for an enemy that, at least in his eyes, should not exist. But Elias did exist, and he was just getting started. Adrian Cross was unraveling. At first it was just a whisper in his mind, a nagging sense that something was off, that the shadows felt deeper, that his once loyal men spoke too carefully around him, that every time he closed his eyes, he saw Elias Wolf's face. But paranoia was a poison, and Elias knew exactly how to let it seep deeper. Adrian was erratic now, more violent, more unpredictable. He had men executed for the smallest mistakes, convinced that spies lurked within his ranks. His grip tightened, but the tighter he held on, the more his empire slipped through his fingers. And Elias, he watched, like a predator waiting for the perfect moment to sink its teeth into its prey. Because taking Adrian's life would have been easy, but Elias didn't want easy. He wanted Adrian to feel everything he had felt. He wanted him to lose everything first, striking from the shadows. Adrian had one fatal flaw, his arrogance. He thought Elias was dead in the water, a ghostly presence at best, a forgotten relic of the past. And so, he never suspected that the men closest to him were no longer his men at all. One by one, Elias turned them, not through threats, not through money, through fear. He let them believe that Adrian was already finished, that the ship was sinking, and the only way to survive was to jump before it was too late. And just like that, Elias stole his army without firing a single bullet. With Adrian's men secretly aligned with him, Elias executed his next move, crushing Adrian's wealth. The accounts that had been leaking funds suddenly hemorrhaged. Business deals collapsed overnight. Fake scandals erupted in the media, turning Adrian from an untouchable figure to a man drowning in bad press. His empire was crumbling, and then Elias let himself be seen. The return of the king. It happened at one of Adrian's most extravagant parties, a night meant to showcase his power. The elite of the city gathered, drinking expensive champagne, pretending that the walls weren't caving in around them. And then, through the sea of laughter and wealth, a single presence froze the room. Elias Wolf walked in, no longer the broken man they had mocked, no longer the ghost they had whispered about. He was power incarnate. Dressed in black, his presence suffocated the air itself. He walked through the party as if he owned it, Because he did, the room fell silent. Eyes darted toward Adrian, waiting for a reaction. And Adrian, he looked like he had seen a demon crawl out of the depths of hell. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Elias murmured, picking up a glass of wine from the bar. Adrian was frozen in place. He had spent months convincing himself that Elias was just a shadow in his mind, that he was gone. But Elias Wolf did not disappear. He only waited. You're dead," Adrian stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Elias took a slow sip of the wine, letting the moment sink in. Then he smiled. "Not yet." And with that, the party was over. Because in that moment, everyone knew Adrian Cross was not the king anymore. Elias Wolf had returned, and soon there would be nothing left of Adrian but his screams. The final blow. Adrian fled. He knew what was coming. He had seen the fear in the eyes of his men, the way they no longer saw him as their leader. He packed bags of money, set up private jets, anything to escape the inevitable. But Elias was always 2 steps ahead. At the airport, as Adrian reached his private plane, he was met with an unexpected sight. Elias was already there, standing at the bottom of the steps, hands in his pockets, calm as ever. Adrian froze. He had nowhere left to run. "Did you really think I'd let you leave?" Elias asked, tilting his head. Adrian reached for his gun. His hands were shaking. Elias didn't even flinch. "Go ahead," he said. "Shoot me. But you and I both know this was never about bullets." Adrian hesitated. His grip tightened, but his hands were drenched in sweat. His breath came in ragged gasps. And then, for the first time in his life, Adrian Cross realized what true fear was. Because Elias Wolf was not here to kill him. He was here to erase him. And Adrian knew, in that moment, that his story was over. He dropped the gun. Elias smiled. Smart choice. And with that, Adrian Cross ceased to exist. His empire belonged to Elias Wolf once more. And this time, no one would take it from him.